Welcome to this month's Greg Griffith Leadership Podcast. Join Greg Griffith as we together learn what it means to be leaders of our world as we faithfully love and faithfully lead. Like, share, rate, and review this podcast with your friends and others of influence, for they too are looking for people like you to help them lead in love day to day. Without further ado, here is your host, Greg Griffith.
Hey, good day to everybody. Thanks so much for joining Greg Griffith Leads and where you're faithfully living and faithfully loving. We're really excited about today and our podcast today. I have a great friend of mine, an amazing leader, an amazing pastor, and an amazing man of God, Tim Klinkenberg. He's a pastor at St. John's in Orange, California. So he's never seen snow that lasts longer than a day, right? Not really. Yeah. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great today. Just got back from the doctor. I'm fit as a fiddle.
There you go. That's great. And did the doctor fix your mental illness of being a Packers fan?
She could do nothing with that, nor with my basic looks.
Oh.
I'm kind of stuck with where I'm at on a lot of that stuff.
Okay. Well, this will be for all time. Win total for the Packers this year.
I don't know. There's a lot of optimism coming out of Green Bay. I'm thinking 10 or 11 wins is going to be a very successful season.
Wow.
I know you're a Lions fan.
Wow.
If you guys don't do the Super Bowl this year, you're in deep trouble.
We actually don't worry about the Super Bowl. We just, we're just going to win the North again. So that's about it. So, yeah.
Oh, it'd be great.
Yeah.
I think we can both agree that the Vikings and Bears are terrible.
Yeah. You and I both have too many friends for me to comment and still want to keep them as my friends. So, yeah. But what we can agree on is that the Broncos are going to be terrible, and the AFC is not even in the class of the NFC.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I know you're right about a lot of things, but
I always am.
That's probably the most important thing you're right about right there. And we've got friends who are Broncos fans. They're just, they're so like they don't even know the game or anything. I mean, it's kind of funny to taunt them a little bit.
Yeah. I have one friend that he really does not know football at all. And I usually actually ask him to text you to learn like what a quarterback does. And
right. I've tried to help them with things like there's 4 quarters, right? It's a quarter. So 1 quarter, 2 quarter, totally. Second quarter's halftime. It's very frustrating for guys like us.
No, I think the old saying and axiom is true. You can't always fix stupid. So you just move on.
Right. I mean, that's the second time I've had a conversation about that today.
Well, I think this actually leads super well into why, like, you're so good in ministry, and you are one of the best leaders and best pastors that I've had the chance and the privilege to just learn from and know. So how did you even get into ministry?
That's a great question. My dad was a pastor, and on Thursday nights in his old church up in Anaheim, California, just up the road from where I'm at now, my dad made me do stuff. So I had to play in a musical group, which was awful. I was the handbell guy, and I used to have to do the tables and bring in the things. I had no musical ability whatsoever, but he made me go do evangelism calls. And I used to go out with a former professor of yours, Dr. Marty Schramm, and he vicared for my dad, and we would go make calls. And that was my first year up at Cal State Fullerton, and it was just Marty Schramm was a very fine man. And I remember distinctly making a visit to a lady in a dark, dark night up in Placentia, California with Marty. And the lady said, "Are you going to be a pastor like your dad?" And I go, "There is no chance. I don't want to do that, blah, blah, blah." And I just remember it being very much a incremental thing, right? It wasn't like I got knocked off a horse or barfed out like a fish or something like that, but just very affirming all the way through. And so that was kind of then, you get a toe in the water, then your foot, then your leg, then all of a sudden you're swimming. And that's kind of how my story worked. I had a lot of good affirmation along the way.
Gosh, those evangelism calls and those calls with people of God and homebound calls, they just can be so life imprinting. I mean, and just memorable forever. I still remember meeting with one lady when I was probably about the same age as you were talking about. Like, I was in college and working at my church for a summer job. And so my job was to go meet. And I met with this lady and I asked her, I said, "So tell me about your family." And she said, "Oh, I had 12 brothers and sisters and they all died."
Wow.
And
Holy smoke.
I said, what do you mean? I was like, at once? And she said, yes. And she said, they all went out and then came home, and she had been out with a friend and stayed over at that friend's house at night. And she said, when we were growing up, she said, we used to love raw bacon. And she said, so we ate raw bacon all the time. And she said, and they all got strychnine poisoning. And she said, the only reason I lived is because I wasn't home that day. And she said, I still love raw bacon, but I won't eat it.
Yeah, good for her.
But she talked about the hope of that, and then talked about like her faith formation, and talked about going from one of 12 to an only child in a moment's notice, and then I'll never forget this sweet lady at 98 years old. And, as I get older, I just now understand even more and more. She was 98, and I just said to her, "Dolly, how you doing?" And she said, "Pastor, I'm 98. She said, "You got to be strong to get old. It's not for the weak."
Right, spot on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, well, that's really cool. So your dad impressing on you as a pastor, but impressing on you how to go out and evangelize. And I think that's going to be something really important, because I think we're going to circle and see that a little bit later on. Let me ask you, so first of all, how long have you been in ministry? How long have you been a pastor?
I've been a pastor since 1991.
Oh,
Graduated from Concordia Seminary in 1991. So I've been a pastor 33 years.
Wow.
And I've actually been at the same church for all but 21 months of that at St. John's here in Orange, California.
Wow.
Met my wife in college at Concordia in St. Paul. Good life, Moved my Midwestern girl out to the coast and really never looked back. It's been a very fortunate, godly thing. I've been very, very blessed to serve the congregation I serve, and they've grown along with me. I became a very young senior pastor, and I wasn't very polished or very smooth, but they were very patient with me. I love our church. I'm so grateful to serve in St. John's.
Let me ask this question, because I think there's something here to this. And first of all, St. John's is one of the largest churches and schools in our denomination, and thriving and continuing to thrive. And what do you think your longevity of being there has to say about not only the impact and the influence and the reach of St. John's, but also just for you and your ministry? Because that's a rare phenomenon. I think the average pastorate is 3 to 5 years, if I recall. And so for someone to have been there for just under 32 years is rare. So tell me about why you think that is an important piece.
Well, the people are so gracious. I was elected senior pastor. I was 34 years old, and the church was really struggling. There was a lot of conflict, and I was too young and too naive to kind of understand that I had a tiger by the tail. So I just went about the work of peacekeeping, and that worked for quite a while, for probably 12 years. And we did some building projects, and those were successful. But when I got to be 48, I kind of hit the wall, and I was burned out and physically not in good shape, and I didn't kind of see the next horizon. But I went away to school then at Fuller and worked on a doctor of ministry degree, which I got a couple of years ago. And the understanding the church is bigger than just St. John's, or the church is bigger than just the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or me or whatnot, was extremely helpful. And so I was able to be the young guy who was kind of on fire without crashing and burning. I was able to hit the midlife and the mid game pretty good at 48, and the congregation embraced the education and the weight loss and all of those things. And so now I'm in a pretty good shape. I used to be the hair on fire supervisor that, was kind of hateful and mean and not good with expectations. But over the course of time, I've learned to be a better leader. I like to say I feel sorry for the people who worked for me when I was between 34 and 47, because I was a bad supervisor, or a difficult supervisor. And now, I get it a little better. So our congregation has morphed as you guys have in Omaha, that we were able to really recreate ourselves and our ministry after COVID, because so much had changed. And in California, so much had shut down. We were able to redo culture and things like that. So I think the love of God, I think the care of God's people, I think God's people living by grace, and then continuing to be a lifelong learner, a reader, a thinker. I've had good mentors, and, going back to school, all that stuff was very helpful for staying on the edge rather than retreating back to what I was comfortable with.
Yeah, let me press into something you said there, because I think there could be something that a lot of people may be able to grasp and to learn on that. So around 48, you said you were experiencing burnout, and can you just talk, like, one, how did you figure out and come through the burnout, but then also stay in ministry, because you could make more money. You could have less stress. You could have as much influence in doing things that aren't ministry. And so I'm assuming that there may have been some temptation of, like, career change, stuff like that. So what was it that, how'd you just kind of say, no, I'm gonna go through this. I'm gonna figure it out. And then how'd you go about that? Because I think there's a lot of people in ministry and in regular vocation right now just struggling with, do they want to keep doing what they're doing?
For me, it was a question. My barometer for anxiety is always resentment. And when I start to being resentful and kind of angry, I know it's time to take the foot off the gas. And I really, at that point, couldn't get rid of that anger. And my wife kind of looked at me, and my dear wife, she's like, hey, you got to get with the program here, man. You're either going to die or kill somebody. And so I was able to go. I've got a very supportive elder board, and in our congregation, the trustees run all the facilities, finance, personnel. They're my supervisor, and the elders are my soul, right? They're the keepers of the culture of the congregation and all that stuff. And I think that them walking with me through that without judgment and saying, hey, you got to be this and you got to do that, them being gracious and kind, as well as a couple of them stepping up and as prayer partners and as mentors, it's extremely helpful. But I think you get to a point where, like for me, it was either grow as a pastor or start something new. And I figured going to Fuller and doing the lifelong leadership thing under the invitation of James Watley. James, he would fly in and I'd go up and meet him in Pasadena, and then I helped him with some stuff. And he said, you got to do this. I said, I don't know if I want to. He goes, no, you have to. I go, okay. And then someone from the congregation, one of my elders, stepped up and paid for it all. Wow. And those 3 weeks of that 3-year program were probably 3 of the best weeks of my life. It helped me become a lifelong learner and able to grow. It helped me to be more self-reflective. I don't know what kind of a student you were at SEM, probably better than me, but nope. I read bare minimum. And when I was at Fuller, I read everything. And it was very, very, very helpful for my soul to read Henry Nouwen and Richard Rohr and Brennan Manning. And, it's just good for your soul. So that really, really helped. And instead of just pressing on and saying, I'm gonna break through, I backed off a little bit and took the pressure off myself, my family, my church, my staff, that kind of stuff. So that was very helpful.
So like this is so rich. I'm so thankful because Tim, you just have this amazing self-awareness and an ability to authentically just share that. And so,
Man.
where do you think like that self-awareness, like how'd you develop that?
That's very kind of you. It's very kind of you to say that. Pastor Ash, my predecessor, he once said, he called me in and he said, you can either tell me the truth or you can lie to me and I'll know if you're lying. So, and he dropped this thing on me and I go, no, I didn't do that. He goes, okay, great. Thank you. I knew you didn't. And, just learn to be honest. He said, and he always called me Timothy, be honest, don't lie. So I learned that from him. And it's funny because I was talking to our district president about something completely unrelated. And he goes, thank you for being open. That's the only way I know. But I've had a number of good mentors, but one of my mentors' name was Mark Stunkel. And he just said that. He said, just taught me early on, right? As a 32, 33, 34-year-old pastor, you got to do that. I think some of that self-reflection is very difficult in our tradition. We tend to be very analytical intellectually, but to be in tune emotionally, I think that comes from the mentors I've had. And some have pulled me up short. I'll never forget in this huge hot meeting, and it was really ugly. And I said the opening prayer, and then I took a breath and started to talk. And he tapped me on the knee, and he goes, "You don't always have to be the first one to talk." Oh my God! But then he pulled me aside after the meeting, and he goes, "Let the thing grow. Right? You'll have plenty of time to talk if you listen first." And so I think part of that is the mentors I've had, and it's just the culture of our church now. Some of our meetings get a little raw because of that. But like at our last trustee meeting, the leader pulled everyone aside into the middle of the boardroom, and we held hands and we looked down at each other's feet and we prayed together. And, that kind of transparency just feeds the soul. I think it's too hard to fight against those things, to hold them in. Although I know you pretty good, brother. You're like that too. You're very transparent and very open. And then maybe that's why we're such good friends, because we share that characteristic.
Yeah, I think transparency for me, it's just who I am. I'm not a great poker player, so people do know by my face how I feel, and they can tell by my tension or lack of tension in my lip where my emotional gauge is happening. But I also I'm with you. I think there's authenticity, and I think our transparency and the reality of just being open of, hey, I may have an opinion about this and I might be wrong, I might not be wrong. It doesn't, that's just who we are. And honestly, I think if we were to lead more with the authenticity of that transparency, to listen more, I think it removes imposter syndrome, because I don't feel like I'm an imposter, because I never walk into the room thinking I'm the expert.
Right.
Do I have a lot of experience? Absolutely. Do you have a lot of experience? For sure. But can you learn something from someone else in the room? For sure. And hey, let me ask you this. I'm really curious about this question. Would love to talk a little bit more about this. What do you see missing in leadership in the capital C church, right? So what do you see missing in capital C church, and whether you want to go with just our denomination or as a whole, capital C church, what's missing from your vantage point as an expert leader?
A couple things. Slow to listen, quick, slow, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And when we do men's leadership class, we do 20 weeks, they come out of it and they wink and they go, quick, slow, right? They go, yeah, quick, slow. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. My dad and my grandpa were both pastors, but there was this little bit of anger, and loudness. My grandfather was very, very loud, very, very angry, and he would justify that anger with some losses he had in his family and those things. But there's almost like I don't know. Anger like that's a punch in the nose, right? It's a jab that says, back off, leave me alone. And when people are quick to become angry, I'm always kind of looking at what's going on underneath. Typically, they're not mad at you. And another thing we say is the thing is not the thing, right? The presenting issue is not the thing. There's something deeper that's driving it. And I think that if we would listen to one another a little more intently rather than speak so quickly and then get angry when someone disagrees with us, that's not the culture of our church. It's taken 33 years. We're pretty normal until it's time to get busy, and then we're very intense. I think there's a pedantic nature of the LCMS in that it's not about doing the right thing. It's about doing things right. Worship, right? We're not so concerned about the content as the form. And I get that, right? You grew up Missouri Synod. I grew up Missouri Synod. I was raised on the 1941 hymnal and Lutheran worship, page 158 and all that stuff. But it's not necessarily always about doing things right or doing it the right way. It's about doing the right things. And I think if we could pull back the yoke of the airplane and gain some altitude on that and be a little more open to one another, that would at least unite us as brothers in ministry. But that's a hard call because our institutions train pastors to be sole proprietors. And so my thing has always been, at the conferences, greet the young guys, hang with the young guys, put your arm around the young guys. And then sure enough, they call and say, oh, dude, I got this thing with this deal and I'm going to die and I'm never going to learn. Well, let's think it through. So there's some of that happens organically in our tradition, but I think the Big C Church, like outside of Lutheranism, I just got back from a very good seminar by Tom Rainier at the Billy Graham Cove thing. And they're all going through the same stuff we are. Where do we find pastors? How am I going to make it to retirement? Where have all my people gone? And I think with the love of Christ, we lean into one another and listen and encourage one another. That'd be a huge piece of that. We're not in competition to have the largest sole proprietary church, right? Or sole proprietor church. We're in it to love Jesus and lead people to the same. So I think if we had a little bit more missional focus, we'd be in better shape. Quick, slow, man. I love that.
I love the quick, slow. I'm going to definitely be adopting that out through my own thinking and terminology. Let me ask you this question. As someone with just authenticity and someone who has great self-awareness and leadership, what do you think when you look at the Big C Church overall right now, and when we see the Big C Church, we see a lot of stuff happening. We see from just in a couple areas some great moral failures. We see also in the Big C Church just some kind of protectionism and kind of calls to purity or calls to go back well before. What do you think is a way that like how do we go about leading and helping as mentors to those who are coming up younger? What's the best ways to help others avoid these same pitfalls that we see happening around us right now?
Oh man, I think it's. Like I intentionally had guys put their arm around me and say, "Hey, Tim, I'll walk with you." And they're just giants of industry and church and just fabulous guys. And I think there's got to be some of that. And you put your arm around a guy and maybe he's going to, you're going to connect and maybe not, then go to the next guy. But I think some of it is realizing that we're in a very transitional time, I would say. The church has lost 25 million people have walked away from the church in the last 20 years. Wow. It's just insane. We've lost more people to the Big C Church than we gained through the two great awakenings following the Civil War. So what is God doing? And what's the outcome going to be? And I think the answer is, I don't know, but it ain't going to look like it does now. Yeah. And so, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of churches are closing, and how, right? What's it going to look like when we're done? And I think leadership is a huge part of that, right? You have to have some vision for where you're going, and it doesn't need to be this uncanny, weird, spiritual, God came to me in a puff of smoke and said, but I think as a leader in a church, like, you need to kind of point the direction out. And it seems to me that churches that have some sort of forward focus rather than zero forward focus are hanging in there. But I believe we're in a very much a transitional time. And I won't live to see I'll probably live to see the end of it, but I won't be a pastor in it. But I think you and your colleagues are in a marvelous spot to kind of sketch out what the future looks like for the Big C Church. And that's cool. I'm happy for you guys on that. I got to see the triumphalism of the late 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. That's all gone. Even those big megachurch guys out here, they're scraping and working and grinding like they never thought they were going to have to, because everyone worships and knows Jesus. And now we're all right in the middle of a pretty agnostic, might not be a strong enough word, but certainly a secular culture. Yeah.
So then what excites you about the church in the next decades? Like with all that, what are you excited about?
Oh my gosh. The opportunities are so ripe, right? So one of the things, there's two things I just love doing. One is my leadership class, and I always leave halftime of Monday Night Football, doesn't matter who's playing. And I go, I can't believe I got to go do this. Jesus must have a room for me in heaven that's, studded with, green and gold. And then I come back and I wake Barb up and I go, she goes, it's 9:30. What's your problem? I said, oh God, it was the best ever. The guys were talking, and the guy did a devotion and shared his life and gave his testimony. And you're like, oh, it's just great. And so I love doing that and watching and forming young leaders and knowing that they're going to be here in this congregation, anywhere between maybe 12 years and death, right? There, people come and stay, and that's super cool. And the other thing I get to teach and be a part of is our new member class. And it used to be how many former Catholics come, how many former Presbyterians come. And now they don't come in griping about, well, all the church wants is money, or we're going to join the church, but we're not going to baptize our children. It's, who is Jesus? Tell me about the scriptures. What do you believe? How does this intersect in my life? I mean, Greg, it's just a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. It's like we're back in, 250 AD when the disciples went out, the second and third generation guys went out, and Christianity was new and fresh. It just seems like, and you guys are going to get to see that. Right when it levels out, you're going to be there. And I'm a little bit envious of you and Tommy, and I don't know about our friend Tim in Tomball, Texas, but I'm a little jealous that you guys are going to be able in, say, 15 years to see that and lead it, right? The Big C Church needs leaders, even though in our tradition they don't think they do. They do. You know that.
Well, what I love about that is, right, the coast experience in our country, the coast experience things a little bit ahead of the heart in the Midwest. And, we've been watching, and I grew up in California, but we've been watching kind of the California withdrawal into secularism, and whether you want to call it agnosticism or even just really fringe atheism, and the worry of the Midwest. But to hear God bring that resurgence and back to that 250 AD, right? That hunger, that church that's willing to be the underground secret church, that church of people that are going, hey, we realize that there's nothing here. That is exciting, and that's exciting to know that that's happening on the coast, which would eventually also happen throughout our Midwest. So what a great blessing that is to look forward to. So, yeah. What are you praying about for the church in the next decades? Like, right. So you have a grandson, all right, an amazing grandson, and there. So what are you praying about for them, for your grandchildren?
Well, that's a great thing. I reflect on that all the time. Last night I'm taking out the recycle stuff, the plastics and the aluminum cans and taking out the garbage. And he jumps up on our little wall and he says, "Hey, I want to help you." And he throws the cans in the aluminum and he throws the bottles in the plastics, and he's just all over it. Papa, Papa, Papa. So it's cool, right? And he's in preschool here at St. John's. And his parents are so busy. You know, you got to have two incomes to kind of thrive in the economy. Their jobs are demanding. And so I just see the value of Lutheran education and Lutheran school for him. And it's not that the teachers do what my son and daughter-in-law are not doing. It's that they supplement it, right? They reinforce what goes on at home. And so it's super cool to watch that. But what I appreciate about what's going to last, I think, is the proclamation of the gospel. And when I was in the Billy Graham thing, it was just funny because, "Are you saved?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I was saved." They go, "No, are you saved?" I go, "Yeah." And they ask you so much. I'm like, well, now I don't know. Right now, I thought I was. So I'll talk to you. But the proclamation of the gospel and proclaiming Jesus as Lord and Christ, right? Paul gets through that whole Pentecost sermon and he says, "This Jesus whom you crucified is both Lord and Christ." And I think one of the unique pieces that our tradition has is the articulation of the cross and atonement and sacrifice for sins, and then having a sacramental theology that's tied to that. It's very tangible and very real. And I think it's appealing to the younger families. And as it kind of permeates culture here, at least where we're at, we're not Catholic, we're not Catholic light, but people know the gospel when they experience it. And when they can experience through the preschoolers saying, "Hey, we pray when we have ants on the log for a snack. How come we don't pray at home?" Okay, now, yeah, like the disciples, "Lord, teach us to pray." Yeah. So it's a rich time. There's tons of opportunity.
Oh, that's so sweet. 33 years in ministry. If you could put your arm around first year Pastor Tim, what would you tell that guy?
Oh, man, I've had that. You sound like my therapist now. And like you, I've had interns and vicars and all that stuff. And don't get caught on the treadmill of pleasing people. Mm-hmm. And that died at 48. Mm-hmm. And because like your system at King of Kings, St. John's system is too big to please everybody. And I believe it's in Canoeing the Mountains where the author says, leadership is giving people the amount of disappointment they can handle without quitting. Yeah. I say you just can't please people, but find your true north, and go. And people will love you and care for people along the way. Don't collect them or use them, but love them. And they'll be there. Yeah. But that's, the young Tim wanted to do everything to please other people. And then you figure out that's ignorant, and God doesn't call us to that, right? So that's good. That's a hard piece for many of us to swallow, because we get into the ministry because we want to, right? We want to do those kind of things and we want to please people. But once you get through that, it's pretty empowering.
That's good. Well, my two takeaways that I heard, actually, I'm going to have three takeaways. First is quick, slow. Second, and this was a thread all throughout, is have mentors and then also be a mentor. And I think that's something I hear you saying is not only did you have mentors, you still have mentors, but then also you are being a mentor to someone. And so it's so important, whatever we're in. And then lastly, like, know your true north and know yourself, and be okay with that. But don't be a jerk about it. Love through it. Right. And that's okay. So Tim, how do you want to close today? Any closing thoughts?
No, I just remember when you and I first met, and it was at a We Love the Seminary event, and you and me were cooking chicken on a grill, and it was so bad
Yeah.
And it wasn't organized. It wasn't put together. We kind of looked at each other like the lady with the bacon, Greg. We kind of looked at each other like, if they're going to get sick, it's not going to get rest.
No.
We're going to be okay. And I'll never forget your easygoing attitude, and you're so easy to like. And brother, we've been friends since that. Since we serve good chicken instead of raw hot dogs. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate our friendship. And you know, even though you cheer for sports teams that are pitiful, I love you like my little brother, and I'm just very grateful for you.
Well, I love you too, man, and I'm so honored that you spent some time with us today, and thank you so much for just showing us what it is to faithfully lead and faithfully love out into our world. And you are one who is making the church truly great, and because of your leadership, heaven's fuller and the kingdom's stronger and lives are greater. So thanks so much. Thanks for the time. Hey, everybody, like, share, rate, and review this podcast, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you for being a part of this month's Greg Griffith Leadership Podcast. Join Greg next month for leadership insights to faithfully love and faithfully lead. Now go be terrific today.